They all laughed. Not the quiet, polite kind you offer when someone tries to be funny at a family dinner. No. This was loud, raw, echoing off the walls laughter. It filled the Brooks family house like we were characters in a bad joke. And the punchline was us. Hailey Brooks sat there, right beside her two best friends, Madison Carter and her little sister, Avery Brooks, still holding the small floral box in her lap. A gift from their mother, Barbara Brooks, a woman who smiled far too wide when she thought she was being clever. Inside that box, napkins, elegant, embroidered napkins from some boutique downtown. Beautiful? Maybe. Meaningful? Not even close. Barbara's voice sliced through the laughter like a knife. Well, you girls clean up after everyone anyway. And that was it, that was the joke. Uncle Richard nearly spit out his drink from laughing so hard. Olivia Brooks, their picture-perfect cousin, adjusted her new gold watch, the one that had once belonged to their grandmother, glinting like a trophy on her wrist. Even Grandpa Walter, usually the quiet observer, let out a low chuckle, more out of routine than amusement. Hailey felt the heat crawl up her neck. Avery's jaw clenched so hard the tension rolled down her arms. Madison sat frozen, her hands locked in her lap, squeezing tight. They didn't speak, they didn't need to, because this was what it had always been. Hailey's fingertips brushed over the delicate edge of the napkin, the same way her heart brushed against every unspoken disappointment she'd ever swallowed in this house. Across the table, Olivia beamed, radiant, flawless, sitting tall like royalty in her designer dress, flashing that practiced smile they all knew too well. That watch, the one Hailey used to admire as a little girl while sitting at Grandma's vanity, gleamed like it had never belonged to anyone else. Was this really happening? Hailey kept her face blank. She had to. But inside, she was spiraling. Why did this still hurt so much? Why did she always feel like an outsider in her own family? The room moved on like it always did. Uncle Richard joked about getting them matching aprons next year. Olivia tossed her hair back, her blue eyes flickering with smugness. Not love, not pity, but something worse. Dismissal. That was always the wound that cut the deepest. Because they had always been the ones who showed up, the ones who remembered birthdays, who set the table, who stayed late to clean, who checked in on Grandpa when no one else bothered. They never asked for a trophy, just a little recognition. But tonight, napkins and a joke. As the laughter started to fade, something colder slipped into the room. Awkward silence. Heavy, sharp around the edges. They noticed, of course, that none of the girls had laughed. That's when Hailey knew. Not this time. Slowly, with a steadiness she didn't know she still had, she reached into her bag, pulled out the manila envelope. Slightly worn at the corner from weeks of carrying it with her, she laid it on the table, soft but deliberate, right there in front of them all. No words, just the sound of Grandpa Walter's old clock ticking behind them like a warning. Barbara's smile froze. Olivia leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing in suspicion. Uncle Richard shifted uncomfortably like he wasn't sure if this was a setup. It wasn't. Hailey looked up, eyes calm, meeting every gaze around that table. I brought something too. And just like that, the laughter stopped. The room felt colder after that. Or maybe it was just me. Maybe it had always been this cold, and I'd just gotten too good at pretending I didn't feel it. Every joke, every backhanded comment, every time I was reminded that I didn't fully belong, not like Olivia did. But before I tell you what was inside that envelope, you need to understand how we got here. I'm Hailey Brooks. I'm 28, the quiet one, the helper, the girl in the background of her own life story. Madison Carter, my best friend since middle school, always said I had the softest heart she'd ever known. Avery Brooks, my little sister, said I had the worst habit of letting people walk all over me. And maybe they were both right. Growing up in this house, it was always the same story. Olivia was the storm, bold, brilliant, impossible to ignore. And I was the cleanup crew. The steady hands left behind to pick up whatever mess she left in her wake. Olivia had straight A's, scholarships, a growing business, and somehow always had time to update Mom on every shiny accomplishment. Me? I worked in nonprofit accounting. I bought a small condo last year. I paid my bills. I showed up. But nothing I did ever sparkled quite the same way. When I got promoted, Mom sent me a thumbs up emoji. When Olivia got invited on a podcast, Mom hosted an entire family brunch in her honor. It became a pattern, a painful, exhausting pattern. one I got used to, until I almost forgot it wasn't supposed to feel this way. This was supposed to be Olivia's birthday weekend celebration, a small family thing. Mom insisted on hosting it right here, in the same house we grew up in. Same creaky floorboards, same chipped plates, same tension hiding under all the forced smiles. When I arrived that night, it was all routine. A half hug from Mom, Barbara Brooks, a distracted wave from Olivia, Grandpa Walter patting the seat next to him, his quiet way of saying I see you. He's never been loud, never the overly affectionate type, but we've always had this unspoken bond. Maybe because he saw me, really saw me, even when no one else did. Over the past year, as his health declined, I was the one who took him to every doctor's appointment, managed his medications, made sure he still got to visit the park, his favorite place on earth. No one ever really asked how that was going. They just said, "Thanks, Hailey," like I was doing them a favor, not family. That night, of course I helped set the table. Of course I brought the wine Mom liked, even though she never once told me she appreciated it. Of course I baked Olivia's favorite cake, lemon with raspberry filling. And of course no one noticed I brought it in a box because I had to rush straight from the office. I was cast in a role I never auditioned for, the helper, the quiet one, the girl with her sleeves rolled up and hair tied back. And when Mom handed Olivia Grandma's gold watch, the same one Grandma used to let me try on while brushing my hair in her bedroom, I knew exactly what was happening. Olivia laughed, wrapped it around her wrist like it had always belonged to her. And me? I sat there holding a box of napkins, feeling like an extra in my own story. But that envelope, that was the first time I ever stepped out of the script they wrote for me. I'd been carrying it for weeks, unsure if I'd ever use it. But that night, something cracked. Not out of anger, out of truth. Out of finally realizing that no one was going to acknowledge me unless I forced them to look. And so I placed it on the table. Because that night wasn't just a birthday dinner. It was a reckoning. I never wanted to feel like I had to win something just to matter. But tonight, the napkins, the laughter, the weight of it all settled in my chest like wet concrete. It wasn't about the gift, it was about the message. You're the servant. You're the afterthought. I sat there, blinking slowly, letting the memories flood in like a storm I didn't bother holding back anymore. Every birthday when Olivia got something thoughtful, personalized, while I got socks from the clearance bin. Every crisis when I showed up early, stayed late, only to hear Mom turn to Olivia later and say, "You're so strong, honey." Every time Grandpa needed someone, I was the one who answered the call. Not because anyone asked me to, they rarely did, but because I couldn't stand to watch him be forgotten, the way they so often forgot me. That injustice, quiet and sharp, swelled in my chest like rising water. And so I said it, clear, calm, like the final note of a song I'd been rehearsing my whole life. I brought something too. And just like that, everything stopped. No one touched their wine, no one reached for dessert. Silence stretched across the table like a crack in glass. Madison sat beside me, still, unreadable, but I could feel the pulse of energy between us. Avery? She sat back in her chair, arms crossed tight, eyes burning holes through every single person at that table. Olivia, for the first time all night, looked uncomfortable. Her polished facade flickered, just barely. Mom's brow furrowed, a line of worry creeping into her perfect posture. Uncle Richard shifted awkwardly, the kind of squirm you see in people who just realize the room's gotten too quiet to keep pretending. They knew this wasn't about napkins. This wasn't a polite gesture. This wasn't paperwork. This wasn't a joke. And that's when I realized this wasn't about revenge. This was about visibility. About finally speaking out loud in a room where I'd been invisible for far too long. They had laughed at me, but they wouldn't be laughing much longer. I let the silence stretch, let it grow uncomfortable. For once, I wanted them to feel the weight of not knowing, to sit in the uncertainty I had lived in for years, wondering if I mattered, wondering if anyone would notice. My fingers tapped the edge of the envelope, steady, unbothered. Mom cleared her throat, the sound brittle against the stillness of the room. "Hailey, what is this?" Her voice was different now, softer, not amused, more cautious. I think, on some level, she already knew that whatever this was, it mattered. I looked up at her, not with anger, not anymore. Just clarity, the kind that doesn't shake, the kind that doesn't beg. The kind of quiet power they had never seen from me before. Just clarity. That's all I had left in me. It's from Grandpa, I said quietly. Something he asked me to take care of a few months ago. Olivia scoffed, sharp, dismissive. Oh, please, what is this? His grocery list? I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. That kind of reaction doesn't come from confidence. It comes from fear. And deep down, she knew it too. Grandpa Walter shifted in his seat, the old wooden chair creaking beneath him. He hadn't spoken much all night, but now he raised his head slowly, looked at Mom, then at Olivia, then at me. She helped me with everything, he said, his voice worn thin but steady. When I couldn't drive, when I couldn't think straight, when I didn't want to admit I was scared. The words floated over the table like a blanket none of us had asked for, but all of us felt. Uncle Richard scratched the back of his neck. Uncomfortable. So what? This is some medical stuff? I almost laughed, not out of humor, but at how deep their denial ran. No, I said, it's legal, it's the updated will. That hit like thunder. Olivia's mouth parted, the slightest crack in her polished armor. Mom leaned back in her chair, blinking faster than I'd ever seen her. Uncle Richard stopped chewing entirely. You changed his will? Olivia's voice was tight, high-pitched, already breaking. No, I corrected, calm, unmoved. Grandpa changed it. I helped him do it properly, because he asked me to. I reached for the envelope, opened it slowly, sliding the papers across the table toward them. Everything was there. Grandpa's wishes, his signature, the witness statements, no tricks, no secrets, just truth, finally on paper. The house, his remaining accounts, personal letters, instructions for his care, even a note explaining why he made the changes. I didn't know if they'd actually read it, but I needed them to see it. Mom stared down at the documents like they were written in a language she couldn't understand. Her face had gone pale, lips pressed so tightly together they almost disappeared. I didn't know he was thinking about this, she whispered. That's because no one asked, I said, softer than I meant to, but sharper than I realized. No one had really seen him. No one had really seen me, and it wasn't anger that filled me anymore. It was something deeper, a kind of grieving, not for what was lost, but for everything that had never been there to begin with. The approval I kept chasing, the affection I thought I had to earn. That night, I didn't raise my voice, I didn't cry, I didn't beg to be understood. I simply told the truth. I never wanted the house, I said quietly. I wanted to be treated like I mattered. Olivia leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowed into knives. So this is your way of getting back at us? I looked at her, really looked at her. No, I said. This is my way of stepping out of the shadow you all were perfectly fine leaving me in. And with that, I stood up. I didn't need to stay for their reactions. Not right away. I had said what needed to be said. I had taken the one thing no one ever gave me. Space. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I felt like the most powerful person in the room. I didn't storm out. That would have been too easy, too loud, too dramatic. Instead, I stepped back from the table, folded my hands lightly, and let the silence do what my voice never could, force them to feel something. But I didn't leave. I stood near the doorway, steady, unshaken, watching as they slowly, almost reluctantly, leaned over the papers I had placed in front of them. Grandpa's signature was there, clear, deliberate, undeniable. The revised will left no room for questions. Olivia was the first to speak, her voice trembling now, the crack spreading through her flawless exterior. This can't be real, she whispered. Why would he leave you the house and everything else? What about Mom? What about me? My heart slowed. It wasn't joy, it wasn't revenge. It was just stillness, a calm I hadn't felt in years. Grandpa looked up, quiet but unshaken, because she earned it. The room froze. I've seen how Hailey shows up, he continued, his voice steadier now, with the weight of absolute truth. She didn't wait for someone to ask her to care, she just did. She never asked for recognition, but that doesn't mean she didn't deserve it. Mom opened her mouth, but no words came. She stared at the table, jaw tight, hands clasped, bracing for something. I'm not saying you're not my daughter, Barbara, Grandpa added, looking at Mom. But Hailey was there when it counted. Every hospital visit, every form I couldn't understand, every meal I couldn't cook. You all sent flowers, she showed up. The truth of his words hit harder than anything I could have said. I turned toward Mom, searching her face for anything. Guilt, regret, even surprise. But all I found was the blank expression of someone finally being forced to confront a truth they had spent years ignoring. Olivia, on the other hand, was unraveling. Her eyes were glassy, her fingers clenched so tightly around her wine glass, like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. "You didn't tell anyone," she snapped. "You just let us sit here like fools." I met her gaze, calm, unwavering. "I let you treat me how you've always treated me," I said quietly. "This time, the only difference is, there's something on paper to show for it." Uncle Richard let out a low whistle, half impressed, half horrified. "Well, damn," he muttered, leaning back. "Guess you were always the quiet one, huh?" I let that sit for a second. Then I said it, the line I had waited my whole life to say. "Not anymore." No one laughed. I looked at the table, still half covered in dishes and crumbs from the cake I'd made. The napkin box sat untouched beside my plate. For a fleeting moment, I wanted to leave it there, let it rot in symbolism. But instead, I picked it up, held it like it meant something. Then I turned to my mom. "I'm not angry anymore," I said. "I'm just done asking for what should have been given freely." Her eyes finally met mine, just for a moment. And in that moment, I saw it. Not understanding, not an apology, but something close. Recognition. And for me, that was enough. I walked toward the door. The napkin box was tucked under my arm like a strange little trophy. Not for winning, but for surviving their indifference. Behind me, I heard Grandpa Walter's voice, steady, warm. "You'll stay in touch, won't you?" I smiled. "Always." And I meant it. For him, I always would. But for the rest of them, this was the day they finally learned. The quiet ones aren't weak. Sometimes we're just waiting for the right moment to speak loud enough that no one ever forgets. The next morning, the house was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that happens after a family dinner. No, this was heavier, intentional, thoughtful. I stayed in the guest room that night, not because I had to, but because Grandpa asked. He wasn't ready to say goodbye, and truth be told, neither was I. I woke up early, like I always did, made coffee, and stepped out onto the back porch where Grandma used to keep her plants. Most of them had withered, not from time, but from neglect. I ran my fingers over a dried rosemary stem, wondering how many things in this family had faded in the same way. Not because they were meant to die, but because no one cared enough to keep them alive. I heard the front door creak open. A moment later, Mom stepped outside. Barbara Brooks. Her eyes were puffy, not from crying, but from that restless kind of exhaustion that comes after reality hits you harder than you expected. She sat across from me without a word, pulling her sweater tighter around herself. For a while, we just sat there, listening. To the birds, to the wind, to the sound of a dog barking down the street. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't know you felt that way," she said, her voice small, like every word was fighting to come out. I took a slow sip of coffee. "You didn't ask." She nodded, staring down at a crack in the porch wood, the same way people stare at mistakes they can't undo. "I guess I thought you were fine," she whispered. "You never made a fuss. You just handled things." "I did," I said quietly, "because someone had to." The silence between us wasn't hostile, just honest. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked at me. Really looked. "I'm sorry, Hailey." I didn't know if I fully believed her yet, but it was the first time I had ever heard her say those words. And maybe that had to mean something. Later that day, I packed my things. Grandpa hugged me tight before I left, leaning in close, whispering in my ear. "You did the right thing, sweetheart." I held on to those words like a lifeline. Olivia didn't say goodbye, but for once, that silence didn't cut me the way it used to. Because I wasn't standing in her shadow anymore. I was standing in my own light. Over the next few weeks, things were different. Uncle Richard sent me a Facebook message, a gif of someone raising a glass. "Respect," it said. I rolled my eyes. But I smiled too. Mom started checking in. Not just about family logistics, real questions, small talks. Once, she even called just to say goodnight. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Olivia and I haven't spoken since. I'm okay with that. The house is mine now. Legally, yes, but emotionally too. I visit Grandpa every weekend, and we sit on that back porch, talking about anything except the past. Because the past doesn't need to be relived. It just needs to be seen for what it was. If I've learned anything from all of this, it's that silence is not the same as peace, and being the one who holds it all together doesn't mean you have to be invisible. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop asking to be seen and simply make yourself undeniable. I never wanted the house, or the money, or the recognition. I just wanted to know that being kind, being consistent, being present mattered. And now I do. To anyone out there who's ever felt like the background character in their own family, let me tell you this. You are not small. You are not forgettable. You are not just the one who cleans up the mess. You are the one who knows where everything goes, including your worth. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment of truth to change everything. If this story meant something to you, even just a little, leave a comment below. Tell me if you've ever felt like the one holding it all together while everyone else took the spotlight. I read every message. And trust me, your story matters too. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone quiet, someone steady, someone who never asks for much, share this video with them. Remind them they're seen. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like this video. It really helps more people find these stories. And if you're new here, or just haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. I share true emotional stories like this every week. Stories about family, about identity, about healing, about learning to finally speak up. Because sometimes, the quiet ones are the ones who have the most powerful stories to tell.